Ladies and gentlemen, I am back. I'm here for part 2 of rating every single player who participated in the 2024 World Championship, rating their performance, their results, what they can take away from the competition, you know what I mean? Last week we covered the unfortunate folks who had a round 1 exit, and this week we'll be doing the unfortunate bastards who went out in round 2. And following that, of course, we'll be doing the quarterfinals later on, maybe next week. And so, you get the point. I don't know how many parts it will take. Anyway, getting distracted already. Into round 2 we go, folks. Robert Milkins. Well, he was ill-tempered and unfocused in round 1 against Pang, but managed to scrape through a scrappy decider. But then round 2, he came up against a brilliant and determined David Gilbert, which didn't help the Milkman's mood. Round 1, he'd been banging his cue. Round 2, he was throwing it. A round 2 exit might not sound too bad on the face of it for Robert Milkins, but it does mean he is now out of the top 16, which he of course burst into after winning the Welsh Open about 18 months ago. So this would be a very low ranking, but I am gonna give him a few extra brownie points for his appearance on Q-Tips. He went on Stephen Hendry's channel and he was just so likeable. Hopefully we see more media appearances from him going forward, because seems like a funny dude, quite a down-to-earth bloke. So I'll give him a 5 out of 10. Tom Ford. He eventually cruised through a very low quality affair in round 1 against Ricky Walden, and was then faced as a reward with the tough prospect of Judd Trump in round 2. He lost 13-7 and, there's quite a bit of pride to take in that. He's not exactly got amazing pedigree at the Crucible, so this was sort of a stepping stone, a step in the right direction for Tom Ford. Won the match that he should have won in round 1, and then lost the match that he should have lost in round 2. Par for the course, 5 out of 10 again. Si Jiahui. So this is a dead interesting one for me. I think the biggest thing that Si Jiahui had to do at the Crucible this year was not go out in dramatic and traumatic fashion like last year. He did amazingly to get to the semis last year, and maybe the fact that he went out in round 2 makes it look like a bit of a failure this year, but I disagree. For a start, he beat Mark Williams in a decider in round 1. That's Mark Williams coming off the Tour Championship victory. That is a brilliant low result for Si Jiahui. He lost in the second round to Jack Jones. It was 13-9, so he put up a damn good fight against the eventual finalist. And as I say, the crucial thing was to go out in a fashion that isn't painful. And he certainly did that, which means he can put to bed last year. So now last year can become like a nice memory instead of a traumatic one. He can console himself with the fact that he's showing a lot of promise early in his career, especially at the World Championships. And he can put to bed the horrors of last year's semi-final. 6.5 out of 10. Shaun Murphy. Another interesting case study, this one. Shaun Murphy is a workaholic who blows hot and cold on the table, but always keeps the cheery and consistent image off it. And look, he's a bit twee for some people's liking, I know. But you do need unoffensive, clean folk like him to be an ambassador for the sport, while the sort of rough and ready types like Ronnie get the headlines for the sport. You need both. And he fits that bill perfectly, so I like him. That said, he was a bit of a headline maker this year, wasn't he? The round 2 match against Stephen Maguire stirred up the old rivalry beautifully. They each took it in turn to show their passion for this matchup. Murphy won his first round match against Liu Haishin quite comfortably, then lost 13-9 to his old enemy Maguire. And at the end of the day, Shaun Murphy would have wanted a lot more from this championship. But after a relatively poor season, could he have expected much more? Probably not. And a few hours later, he was in the commentary box, happy as Larry, so let's not worry about Shaun Murphy. He'll continue to be a brilliant but inconsistent player, and I think we just saw that again this year at the World Championship, and that's fine. So for the third time in this video, a 5 out of 10. Ryan Day. So there is a lot worse performances than going out in round 2 to the greatest snooker player of all time. Except Ryan Day was actually relatively poor in victory over Barry Hawkins. He eventually got over the line 10-8, but that was a lot to do with Barry's performance, not just Ryan's. And my God, Ronnie O'Sullivan was very beatable in round 2. He was so far from his best, and Ryan just did not capitalise on the chances and didn't force Ronnie into enough mistakes. I honestly think that 90% of the other players in the championship would have beaten Ronnie on that day, or 2 days, or whatever. So even though Ryan Day's got quite far by his standards, I think he'll walk away with a lot of regrets. 4 out of 10. Joe O'Connor, my boy is announcing himself now. He's had 2 ranking finals. He rocked up at the Crucible for the first time and beat his hero, his mentor, his mate, Mark Selby. He came across well in his interviews. He had the funny moment of getting lost in the tunnel. Little things that endear himself to the snooker world. And then he came up against Kyron Wilson. And he could only muster 6 frames against the eventual champion. And, you know, that's not terrible at all. Overall, I think it was a belting couple of weeks for Joe O'Connor. It's been a belting 18 months. And I'll say it again, I've said it so many times, that boy will win a ranking event next season. He walks away from the Crucible with more than he came with, which is crucial for my rankings here. Who's walking away with more than they came with? Not just ranking points. Anyway, Joe O'Connor gets a 8 out of 10. Tempted to give him more, but 8 out of 10. Mark Allen. Is there anyone who will be more sick with how this World Championship went? I think every year, one of the big guns falls to a moment of magic, a moment of crucible history, and that John Higgins double in the decider and subsequent clearance was just a little bit more crucible history, and it happened to be Allen who's on the end of it. That's what sent him packing. You can't really account for those things, especially when Allen was so far ahead in the decider, and it's actually John Higgins that's been a bit of a bottle job over the past 2 years. Like, in that situation, you back Allen every time. And the fact that Higgins produced that moment, Allen will be sick looking at how the draw opened up afterwards, who eventually won the championship, who the finalists and semi-finalists were. That was his chance for his maiden title, wasn't it? And he'll worry that he'll be one of those many, many players good enough to win a World Championship that never does. I think he will, but he'll be worried right now. And for that, I can only give him a 3 out of 10. Jack Lisowski. He had to qualify. Did it. Then he had to beat Ding in a decider in round 1. Did it. Then he came up against the resurgent Stuart Bingham. Nearly did it. It was 13-11. And I have to say, I was so impressed with Jack throughout this tournament. He just kept his head down and played good snooker. There was no shocking moments. He had a more rounded game, I thought. He should be a top 16 player, and a top 16 player should be disappointed at going out in round 2, especially to a lower ranked player. But there was so much pressure on Jack. He could have done the Neil Robertson and not even got there. Instead, he got there, played well, won a lot of frames, came up a bit short against Bingham. I'll give Jack a 7 out of 10 on the basis that he can't let this happen again. He has to be a seed next year, surely. So that's it for this one. Next week, we'll be on to the people that you're all waiting for. I know you can't wait to hear about the Ronnies and the Johns and the Judds and whatever, you know. I've got too much to say about them to fit it into part 2. So this is part 2 of either 3 or 4 parts. I'm not organised. And finally, and dead quickly, thank you for making that 3 figures. I know that's nothing by YouTube standards. However, my only previous YouTube account had 7 subscribers, so that is that's Hollywood level fame for me. So thank you, and see you next time.